I hope you are ready because things are about to break down. And I say that because of what just happened with Joe Biden. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity. Today we have to talk about this, which is that Biden supporters now are as dangerous as they are delusional. We've just discovered, obviously, a lot of very disturbing things. I knew, lots of people did know that Biden had obviously progressive mental declines over time, but the degree to which his staff insulated everyone from that and then usurped the power by shielding that fact from everyone, that's a very dangerous situation. And I'm going to tell you why. And of course, in part 2 of this for my subscribers, we're going to talk about just how dangerous this really is. So look, 2 camps have formed after the disastrous debate by Joe Biden with Donald Trump. And the camps roughly are these. Biden is still my pick for president no matter what. That's camp 1. And camp 2 is, have you lost your mind? I'm in camp 2. I do not understand how this could even be a question at this point in time. It's confusing, if not demoralizing, because there should be absolutely no question that at this perilous time, when there's a war, a potential escalation of a war with a major nuclear superpower at a time when the dollar has been weaponized and the BRICS coalition is out there organizing against the U.S. dollar, which is an existential threat for U.S. interests, got to be honest. When we have an uncontained border crisis, when we desperately need adult leadership, we don't even know who's in charge. That's dangerous. So here, let's start with this. This is a recent statement by Biden.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number 1.
What? What did he say?
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number 1.
All right. So he can't recall names. Okay. All right. That happens. How about this one?
Well, guess what? They're trying to push me out of the race. No! Well, let me say this as clearly as I can. I'm staying in the race. I'll beat Donald Trump. I will beat him again in 2020.
Okay, so he can't do dates all that well. I think it boils down to this. Right now, the question that's formed in a lot of people's minds is this. This is the debate. You can read lots of column inches about this. It's all over Twitter, commentary. It's on, all the major media. It's in every major newspaper. Should Biden run for president? And people have broken into sort of those camps. I don't think we're asking or answering the right question, because the answer is obviously no. The real answer ought to be he shouldn't even be allowed to finish his term. This is clear a rationale for Article 25 as I have ever seen. He is clearly not fit for office. Now, we know this. We know this because Merrick Garland is currently still withholding tapes from the interviews that were conducted in years prior, where one of his own assistant attorneys general had interviewed Biden for having mishandled classified documents and other things like that, right? Same thing that Trump got charged with, only in our lawfare state in the United States. You only get charged with things if you're in the wrong party, if you're not part of our democracy, right? If you're part of that other side of things. We'll get to more of that in a minute. But in those interviews, apparently the Department of Justice person came to the conclusion that it probably didn't make sense to charge Biden because he was unfit to understand the charges against him or lacked the mental capacity to understand the charges against him. Now, if somebody is unfit to understand simple charges against them pertaining to something that has been in play for their entire professional career, because Joe Biden is nothing if he is not a professional politician, and that's as polite as I can put it. For anybody who's been in Washington, D.C. for more than 2 terms, you are the oldest profession. I'm talking to all of you. But we're back to this, though, which is, should he even be allowed to finish his term? The answer is no. No, if you are not fit, mentally fit for charges to be brought against you in a theater of operation, which happens to have been your entire professional life. That'd be like saying, you know, we would charge this doctor with malpractice, but we don't think he'd understand the charges against him. So maybe he should just continue being a doctor, right? It's that insane, right? It really is that insane. Carrying on, well, there was this too that also came out.
I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as...
Wait, you're following who?
I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief.
That's you, big guy. It's you, big boy. You big guy, big boy, big guy. So we got that. So he's confusing names, dates, roles. People, come on. These are all obviously signs that somebody maybe shouldn't be in this role anymore. Obviously shouldn't. How about this little gaffe?
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. You can beat President Putin.
President Putin? Look, the guy's standing right next to you, right? It's it's the guy with the biggest acting role, the highest paid acting profession in the world, Zelensky, right? So at any rate, he's clearly lost the ability of facial recognition of people who are standing right in line of sight. He's lost names, dates, all kinds of stuff. These are all signs of somebody who's got what he's got, which is some sort of progressive dementia, and it's pretty far gone. Okay? Now, against that backdrop, Jake Sherman here on Twitter just wrote that I just spoke with Speaker Pelosi. She said she would not discuss her conversations with Biden. Of course not. That would be unseemly. I asked her about whether she's concerned about the number of Democrats who've come out against Biden. Quote, she said, I would have hoped we could get through NATO. I think he's doing a great job at NATO. I wish you would all pay attention. End quote. Love the scolding from another one of those oldest profession types out there. And I'm talking about the original one, politicians. And Nancy Pelosi is obviously really just needs to go out to pasture. I mean, can we just be done with the gerontocracy here? It's too much. But she thinks he's doing a great job. I wish you would all pay attention. Nancy, we are paying attention. He right in the context of the NATO summit, he lost the ability to properly place names, dates, people, probably locations if I searched a little harder. Usual signposts that somebody is no longer in full charge of their mental faculties. But that's been obvious for years, right? The stiff walk, right? Walking like a robot because he's got that dyskinesia, the inability to really control himself, his balance, obviously, falling upstairs, downstairs, across stages, right? All of these things are obvious. They're just obvious. So here's the thing. It is demoralizing to those of us who can pay attention and use our own eyes and see what we're seeing. It's demoralizing to have to pretend like we're not seeing what we're actually seeing. Oh, no, those are fine clothes, Emperor. It's crazy tune, crazy talk, crazy time. And that's what the people who are pushing this whole Joe Biden narrative really represent. Craziness. They're insane. Remember, these are the same people that said safe and effective. These are the same people who are now pushing us breakneck speed towards a confrontation with a nuclear superpower. These are the same people who are telling you you are a racist or a xenophobe if you don't think you should just have an open porous border where tens of millions of people unvetted wash across, right? These people. Who are these people? Let's get to that because this is a really interesting question. Patricia here, writing also on Twitter, said President Biden did a great job last night. The guy understands world affair like nobody's business. Yeah, Joe, really? Yeah, world affairs. That. Remember what Barack Obama said about Joe? Like, nobody can F it up like you, Joe, right? Now put Trump in front of an audience reporter and reporters and ask them similar questions and let's decide. A guy leading NATO versus one who didn't really know what NATO stood for. So again, but you see, they start with the straw man conceit, which is that NATO is this important, valuable organization, and it's not. It is a dangerous anarchistic organization that is now wildly off the reservation. That's what part 2 for my subscribers is going to be all about. I got to go deep into what's happening with NATO and the latest provocations because, folks, it's pretty serious. At any rate, Patricia is over here in Camp Deluded thinking, oh, because NATO's so good, and I think that Biden knows more about NATO. And then she can't even see just how infirm Joe is. So there's actually another conceit sitting under here, some sort of an earlier assumption that Patricia and Pelosi are riding on, which is that it doesn't really matter who the president is in their mind, because what really matters is the team they have around them. So you might not know this, but apparently, according to these people, when you're not really voting a president in, you're voting in their team, whoever they appoint, whoever comes along for the ride. It could be a relative of theirs, could be a brother, could be a son, could be a daughter. It could be anybody at all. It could be somebody who gave the most to their campaign. It could be somebody who's round-tripping foreign money from another country into their campaign, whatever. But this idea that we are going to be led by an administrative class who are there to help administrate in an administrative way the administration of Rome. Because, folks, we are in the decline of empire. This is when people go crazy. As Cicero said, laws get really insane at the end of empire. Well, I'll tell you what else gets really insane. People's perceptions go a little askew here. So let's just dial it back and act as if you and I are capable of forming our own opinions just based on our own lion eyes, looking out into the world and seeing what we see and drawing our own conclusions. I don't need anybody to tell me and interpret for me what I've been seeing about Joe Biden's obvious decline over time. The thing I'm a little concerned about is what it implies that so many people were willing to look past all of that and submit to the idea that without any sort of a referendum, a vote, or an adjustment of the Constitution, that we were now going to be run by an unelected class of people who could decide for themselves whether or not to shield Biden from view and trot him out like a weekend at Bernie's kind of a thing or not. Now, Emmy Joe, 10,400 followers. She said, Biden was great at the NATO summit. He actually thinks before answering anything, so he can give the truth to us in the world. He did an amazing job and has NATO's respect. I won't read the last sentence. So these are two camps, right? And I sincerely don't understand this, because to be in that left camp, you have to be so wrapped up. And by the way, I did a big piece for my subscribers just a couple days ago about what I think has actually happened, how people end up in camp one. I don't think it's organic. I think it is nudged, psychologically operated, cognitive warfare. I think somebody's messing around with our abilities, not all of us, but many people's abilities to form opinions. And they've figured out how to hack belief systems and install beliefs into people, right? You know, the next current thing, right? You know, switched from like the holy mandate, you know, with huge fervor to Ukrainian fervor to this fervor. It's just like one hot swap after another. Somebody's figured out how to hack that system. I talk about it. It's called cognitive warfare. Really important to understand. Come check it out if you want. But now they're in this whole thing wrapped up around this idea that it's something about Biden. And I don't really understand what that even means, because honestly, at this stage, you know what we need and deserve? We need an adult. We need somebody who can really make complicated decisions and come to hard conclusions, because we're on a runaway freight train, folks. When you look at where we are in terms of our deficit spending, the overall interest payments that are about to do a debt spiral out of control, when you look at all of the many, many problems and predicaments we face as a nation right now here in the U.S., but also Europe, for all my European listeners and followers, same thing, Australia too. Don't want to leave you out. New Zealand, Canada. We're all in this together. We all need and deserve actual leadership that's capable of nuance and subtlety, and they have context, and they have a sense of the future, something other than this House of Cards style Kevin Spacey, its power is the only thing that matters, right? Really, I mean, that's what I think we're talking about with these people here is really, it's like Gollum in the ring, like, oh, my precious. They just want their power, right? And it comes down to something like this. So Stephen Walt writes here, Biden's frailty doesn't endanger America. What? So this is a Harvard guy. Plus, he's described as an expert. You add those two things together and you get really bad thinking. Something really broke in our expert university class kind of people. Something just really broke. I don't know what happened. I think somebody should study it. It really looks like a a mental bomb went off and there's just fragments everywhere. And Stephen Waltz obviously caught one right to the head, because he says here, why the president's weakened physical condition doesn't make the country more vulnerable. No, of course it doesn't, Stephen. Of course it doesn't. It's 11 o'clock at night. Biden has passed out for a number of hours, can barely be wakened. Even if you could, you'd have a half vegetable on your hands. And the message is that there are inbound radar signatures detected coming over the pole. What should we do, sir? Well, obviously, Biden isn't going to be the guy making that decision. So, Stephen, the idea that we have unvetted people who we do not know, making those decisions, kind of endangering. And it's really simple thinking to get there. It's really not hard. I don't know what's wrong with you guys. At any rate, Dave Collum, good friend of mine, wrote, it just clicked. They can't even tell Biden anything sensitive because he might blurt it out. He has operationally lost his security clearances. So I agree with this. Who then is keeping this from him? Who decides, geez, we can't let Joe know about this because, he might call Zelensky Putin, right? This might just slip out. There are things, obviously, if I was in that position, there would be things, if I had sensitive information come across my desk, and I was in the White House, I would absolutely not share it with Joe, thinking that he might blurt it out. He might accidentally reveal something that he really ought not to at a sensitive meeting, like at NATO, like Patricia's all excited about. Oh, he's really good, right? He's lost the ability. Obviously, he doesn't have the filters in place or the recall in place. And those two things often go together so that you understand and remember, oh, I shouldn't say this to that guy, right? It's complicated. Politics is complicated. Social interactions are complicated. When you simplify them down, you get problems. So I think this is true. So who then is making the decision what the president sees and doesn't see? Interesting question. And of course, it all leads to the obvious question that everybody is asking across the entire world. I mean, this was just me simply running that query, and this is literally the straight set of articles that just popped up on Google, no filtering by me. Who's running the country? Who is really running the country? Who is running the country? Who is running the country? Who is running the United States? We all deserve to know, and we need to know. The answer is, it's these people right here. All the president's staff who you didn't elect, right? And in particular, I got two names highlighted there. So we got Anthony and we got Annie down there. And so we're going to talk about this a little more. There was an Axios article that just came out. It says here, top aides shielded Biden from staff, but couldn't hide the debate. And this is fascinating because in the article, snippet from it, quote, zoom in, Biden's behavior stunned many in the White House at the debates, in part because Biden's closest aides, often led by Jill Biden's top aide, Anthony Bernal, and Deputy Chief of Staff Annie Tomasini, highlighted, took steps early in his term essentially rope off the president, even while the White House's resident staff, so you got your butlers and all the wait staff, everybody, even the White House's resident staff, this is their personal residence, right? They got to change the sheets, you got to take care of all kinds of things, which serves the first family in the mansion's living quarters, has been kept at arm's length. A former residence official told Axios that Jill Biden was so protective of the president, and then Anthony just protects her, and they often wouldn't let us do anything for him. So they had to keep everybody away because they wouldn't want anybody to notice just how frail and infirm this guy is. So Jill Biden's chief of staff, who is this guy, right? Where did he come from? How did he suddenly get put in this position of following the first lady's orders to keep the world away from Joe Biden so they wouldn't notice something? Now, if you can run this level of deception even inside the White House, right? Obviously, none of us out here were actually fooled because we saw Biden fall upstairs and downstairs and across stages and shake hands of invisible people who weren't there and, sum up America in one word, right? We saw, it was obvious, unapologetically obvious to me at any rate. And I had people come at me all the time going, oh, are you a neurologist? No, I'm just not a dummy. I can see with my own lying eyes what I'm seeing. Pretty obvious. But at any rate, they worked really hard. Anthony, Jill's top aide, worked hard to protect people, keep people away from Joe, right? And the last quote here is, the separation between the family and residence staff was so big and so divided, the former official said, it's not supposed to be. and usually isn't. Even in the Trump White House, that didn't happen. And so that Bernal guy and Tomasini gal and other close aides had easy access to the residence area of the White House. So they had marked the RES on their staff passes, right? RES means you can go into the residence. You got the West Wing, but then you got the residence. So they had the RES on their passes. And some resident staff found it kind of unusual because political staffers don't typically have that access, right? But a White House official said Annie and Anthony never requested to have RES on their badges, and there are other political staff who have that designation too. It just happened. The RES just ended up on their badges, and next thing you know, they were just wandering into the residence. They didn't ask for it. Well, maybe we didn't ask that question then. Who put the RES on the badge? Who did that? Right? They're trying to act like it's just like, oh, this thing happened. It was like an earthquake. Nobody could predict. We don't know. It's like that cocaine just showed up in a locker in a most heavily surveilled, cameraed environment ever. We don't know. We don't know how that happened. Right? It's bizarre. Anyway, these people think you're a moron. They actually think nothing of your intelligence. They think that's an acceptable explanation. And 99% of White House press corps, you prostitutes, right, are going to just go along and write that down and report it. Well, the White House officials tell me that they didn't ask to have RES on their badges. Case closed. Very disappointing. But yes, they do think you're stupid. So here's from that same Axios article, The Intrigue, quote, the former residence official recounted an early incident that set a tone for many resident staffers. And on July 4th, 2021, seems like a long time ago, Biden hosted a party on the South Lawn in which he declared independence from the coronavirus pandemic. It was a hot day. And after hours outside, Biden went back into the White House through the diplomatic room and then into the nearby map room. Biden sat down, and the door was abruptly shut as Biden's aides blocked the White House butlers and resident staff from aiding the president. They suggested to staffers the president was just a little overheated, but the episode left resident staff feeling like his close aides were creating a barrier around anything possibly related to the president's health. Asked about the incident, the White House, again thinking you're just a moron, told Axios, there are many reasons for presidents to need some staff to leave the room at any time because they often deal with sensitive information. Yeah, like he couldn't handle an event and passed out, right? That is sensitive information. We wouldn't want people knowing that, for instance. Very sensitive. But it's not sensitive information like from a national security standpoint. It's sensitive information from a power, politics, and personal embarrassment standpoint. But this is July of 21. Then there was July of 22, and then July of 23, and now in July of 24, this is all sort of coming out now. But this was obvious well before then. So this is actually a big problem, okay? The second part of this problem relates to how the whole DNC party is now organized. And by the way, I'm not left, not right. Give me time, and I'll beat up on the RNC as well, all the odious, nasty, awful players on that side of things. Again, not a fan of the political class, because I think they're all just opportunists and grifters, and they've lost the plot line, and they do what's best for them and not what's best for the future of the country or your children or me or you. So at any rate, but the DNC has a big problem on their hands right now, and they've gotten really aggressive in their messaging, and they talk about our democracy a lot in a way that's really creepy and just a little bit frightening. So this just came out on July 10th. This is Antonio Delgado statement from, this is the New York Lieutenant Governor, right? Blah, blah, blah. President Biden deserves our eternal gratitude, blah, blah, blah. Look at that thing down there in yellow. There is no greater threat to our democracy than former President Donald Trump. He must be defeated. There's no greater threat to our democracy. Because it's not just Donald Trump all by himself out there with no support running around. By extension, Antonio is really saying that everybody in this picture, and pictures like this, there are hundreds and hundreds of pictures of Trump drawing massive rallies, some of the biggest political rallies I've ever seen in this country. And it happens over and over and over again. You see packed fields. There were 100,000 people in New Jersey, a blue state, right? So Antonio Delgado is really saying all of these people don't represent our democracy. Everybody on this picture is a threat or considered a threat by Antonio. Now, this is a real problem. When one of your major political parties is actively declaring that a huge swath of the country, potentially half, is a threat, well, we've really lost the plot line of what democracy is, of what politics should be about what this country is about, what we stand for, what we don't stand for. I really am mystified by this. And I know Antonio is probably just a brain-dead moron, and he's probably just repeating, party talking lines. But a lot of the party has settled down on this as their main talking point, right? Biden comes out with it all the time. You see lots of the talking heads. You see the MSNBC people. They talk about this, CNN, hyperbolically, that our democracy is under threat, right? First off, what is a democracy? I mean, you should know that democracy is never once mentioned in the Constitution or in the Declaration of Independence, because it's not a thing. In the United States, it's not a concept for the United States in terms of its founding documents. So democracy had to sort of be developed over time as an idea. And now they're saying that idea is developed far enough that they know what it is, and it's only the thing they say it is, and it does not include these people, and it doesn't include these people. Biden has never drawn a crowd like that in his entire life. In fact, chance that all of his crowds put together collectively might add up to this one crowd. He's never drawn a crowd that looks like that. But all of these people suddenly this isn't democracy. These people are a threat, right, Delgado? These people, you're calling them a threat to your democracy. That's what they really mean by our democracy is it's a possessive ours, our democracy, not all of ours, ours, which is really, you just got to decode it a little bit. So when people say Trump represents a threat to our democracy, invariably what I hear in my head instead is they're saying Trump represents a threat to my job. So it's very gross. It's self-serving. It's narcissistic. It's not at all elevated and lofty and moral or anything like that. It's really quite embarrassing. And that embarrassment, unfortunately, is going to lead to things even worse. So let's go to how far off the reservation this can finally get. So Jen Psaki used to be the White House spokesperson, and now she's got a career out there as a commentator. Let's hear what she's doing with herself now.
Kamala Harris, the vice president, I'm going to call her vice president now because I keep calling her. She is in my view, an undervalued talent. She's a very fierce communicator. She's very strong, especially on one of the core issues that made the election maybe won or lost on, which is abortion rights. And they said, this is why I think when she did a couple of interviews after the debate, I was sitting on the set with a bunch of other MSNBC anchors, and everybody was like, that was great. It's like, yeah. That's what she's doing out in the country, and nobody is really tracking it. It's just, that's who she is. But
no, Jen, we're totally tracking it. We really are. Let's check in with that fierce communicator, shall we?
The governor and we were all doing a tour of the library here and talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time when we think about a day in the life of our
What? Let's not show you 30 other clips like this. I used to have conversations that sounded a lot like this, but that was usually after the first bong hit on a sofa back in college, right? And of course, life moves on and you leave that era of your life behind. Some don't. Some carry that forward. A fierce communicator. Yeah, you have to fiercely work hard to try and figure out what the heck is she talking about. Oh my goodness. The idea that anybody could, without keep a straight face and say that this lady here represents a serious contender for the position of president of the United States is somebody who's telling you again in a very demoralizing, deflating kind of a way that it really doesn't matter who the president is. It could be a complete moron. It doesn't matter. That's what they're telling you. And why would they say that? Because it's about the administrator class. It's about all the people like Jen who surround themselves around the president and hover and do all of that other stuff, because we're supposed to believe now that being led by a committee of these professional grifters and hangers-oners is somehow a good thing. It's not. It's a very dangerous thing. And it's a very, very dangerous thing because these people have they twist reality for themselves to the point where they now will honestly say with a straight face, Joe could serve another 4 years and Kamala would be a great replacement, right? No, neither of these things are actually true. We can do better. We deserve better. That's my full stance here about how it should be in the United States. And so here is my final view. As predicted, the election is going to be completely tumultuous, and I'm being kind, okay? This next election is going to be really powerfully disruptive, and we're going to see a lot of, no matter how it turns out, roughly half of the electorate is going to be bitterly disappointed, and who knows where that goes next, okay? And so it's very dangerous, and we didn't get here by accident. There are people who specifically pushed us into this position, etc. And by the way, it's no more dangerous than this, which is part 2, which I'm going to be talking about back at Peak Prosperity. So if you're a subscriber, hustle on over because we got to talk about this NATO thing that just happened. We are now one step closer to all-out war with Russia, but NATO is not going to stop until we get that war. I'm worried it's coming sooner than later. I'm worried it's coming before the election, which will add to the overall tumultuousness of it all. So with that, hey, thanks very much for listening. Please come on by Peak Prosperity. If you want to become a member, we'd love to have you, and I do this for my subscribers every week, all week, and just making sense of the world so you don't have to, okay? Saves you time, and I'll give you how I frame things and think about things so that maybe it gives you a leg up, hopefully. All right, but things are coming. Please get prepared. Remember, plant a garden, and it didn't have to be this way. Until next time, I'm Chris Martenson, signing off.